Howdy, it's Uncle Paul. Well, back in 1999, I finished preaching school and I moved up to Wyoming and became the preacher at the Church of Christ in DuBois, Wyoming, and was there for a total of 6 years. And in about 2003, I had written and published, self-published, a little book called Bears Don't Eat Fat People. And by the way, my dad did the illustrations in this book. And so most of it is true. It's exactly what happened. But there are a few places that are just kind of fictional, and I'll point those out. But what I plan on doing, there are 7 chapters to this little book. And so I am going to read one chapter at a time and load them up on YouTube, post them on YouTube. So I am going to begin with chapter 1 called The Situation. And that's an illustration for the chapter my dad did. Okay, here we go. What do fat people and starving people have in common? Both are obsessed with how and when they will score their next meal. Both will lie, cheat, and steal in order to satisfy the immense craving for food. But the great difference between a fat person and a starving person is motive. For one, the next meal is a matter of survival. For the other, it is merely a quick fix for an overwhelming addiction. The significance of this addiction may be understood by revealing an incident from one Saturday afternoon that nearly went awry. I was relaxing in my cluttered bedroom, listening to National Public Radio and belching up Italian sausage memories from lunch. Guzzling the remaining drops of a Dr. Pepper, I was suddenly gripped with a terrifying thought. Was this the last Dr. Pepper? With great effort, I rose from my easy chair and headed for the kitchen. It can't be the last Dr. Pepper. Eating and watching television remained on the agenda for the evening, and experiencing either one without a Dr. Pepper was unimaginable. Oh my, was I going to have to drink water? The situation was turning desperate. Taking a deep breath, I slowly opened the refrigerator door. First, I looked to the door's compartments. It was where I always put the sodas. There was an empty jar of mustard, half a bottle of barbecue sauce, and a full container of fat-free salad dressing, but no Dr. Pepper. Maybe one was hidden behind something on a shelf. Bending down for a close inspection, I shuffled all the items around: an uncovered bowl of tuna salad, a jar of homemade pickles from grandmother, a carton with 2 eggs and 10 eggshells, a store-bought pecan pie, and a tub of butter. The only corner of the fridge not searched was behind a near-empty carton of milk. The top of the carton was touching the exposed coils of the ancient fridge and over time froze to them in a block of ice. If a soda was behind it, I would need a hammer and a chisel. Just when I was about to give up and scrounge for change to purchase a fix from my convenient Dr. Pepper supplier, my eyes were drawn to the vegetable crisper. The top of the crisper was made of clear plastic, which revealed only the muted colors and shapes of its contents. At that moment, the predominant color was red, the same as a can of Dr. Pepper. Could it be? But I never used the crisper. The object was clearly too big to be a can of Dr. Pepper. Maybe it was the bag of apples I bought a couple of months ago. Mom and Dad were visiting, and I wanted them to believe I was eating healthily. Prepared for disappointment, I opened the drawer. It wasn't a can of Dr. Pepper. Before me was a whole 6-pack. How did I misplace a whole 6-pack of Dr. Pepper? Now I was set for the evening, plenty of food, fine television entertainment, and enough Dr. Pepper to last until noon the next day. That is my life in a nutshell. Almost every waking thought is preoccupied with how and when I can satisfy my irrational cravings. For years, I have been extremely motivated in pacifying my addiction and have suffered the consequences. The political correctness crowd might call my predicament caloric challenged, but I just prefer to say I'm fat. The PC crowd might also want to say I have a disease. Obesity may be considered a disease, which has a broad definition, but what it really boils down to is an addiction problem. I suppose every addiction eventually leads to a noticeable adverse effect on the body, but none more noticeable than a bloated physique. Addiction to food is impossible to conceal. People don't have to guess what vice plagues my life. When people see me, they know I am an accomplished food addict. Don't ask how much I weigh because I don't know. My scale measures to 450 pounds and still can't reveal the mystery. Years of experience at being fat taught me to avoid people as often as possible. Most are polite when suddenly face to face with someone gargantuan in girth, but there are a tactless few who drive fat people underground with hurtful remarks and snickers. My dream has been to become a recluse, to live in a place where contact with people is greatly limited. A deserted island would seem perfect, but that would mean spending a lot of time on the beach in a bathing suit. Yes, I would be alone, but not even I want to be subjected to seeing myself in swim trunks. Where would be a place with very few people and the opportunity to wear as many clothes as possible? The answer, of course, was the mountains. The Northwest United States became my focus of eventual habitation. How wonderful it would be to frolic in the piney woods with the moose and bears. I knew frolicking with animals of the forest was possible because it had been done on the Disney Channel since I could remember. Several years would pass and a few hundred pounds would be added before I blazed a trail to the mountains. An opportunity to move to the mountains finally came while I was searching for a place to preach the gospel. After completing 2 years of intensive Bible study and instruction, I accepted a job preaching at the Church of Christ in the little town of Du Bois, Wyoming. I made the move in May of 1999 with the help of my parents. The city limit sign said the Du Bois population was 879. Never had I lived in such a small town. Never had I lived outside of the state of Texas. While wandering the dusty streets searching for the church building, I became very nervous. I suddenly realized that instead of accomplishing my long-awaited goal of obscurity, the opposite would be my lot. This fat boy was going to stick out like a sore thumb in this one-horse town. There was no doubt in my mind that I would be the largest human ever to walk the streets of Du Bois. But not only Du Bois. I was sure to be the token fat boy for the entire state of Wyoming, the literal fat of the land. My parents insisted on helping me set up household. Within 3 days of our arrival, every box was unloaded and everything put in its place, including the pictures on the walls and knickknacks on the shelves. Mom and Dad stayed for more than a week, not wanting to leave. The morning of their departure was one of the few times I saw my parents cry, and it was hard to see them go. I knew they were extremely pleased with what I had chosen to do with my life. At age 32 and weighing hundreds of pounds, I was still their baby boy. The congregation where I would preach consisted of 3 elderly women. They had been informed I was big, but they didn't realize I was big. Mildred was the first one I met. At age 69, she was the youngest, and I would later joke that she was my youth group. Her southern drawl exposed the fact she wasn't a Wyoming native, but Mildred didn't rely on her accent. Rarely did a conversation pass where she didn't declare her southern heritage. However it was done in Wyoming, Mildred made known how it was done in the South, how it was done in Alabama, how it was done in Spruce Pine. She had been a county nurse in Alabama for many years, so my weight was of natural concern to her. There was no badgering to lose pounds or scolding for allowing this to happen in the first place. Only an occasional word of encouragement and concern was Mildred's way. I met Alice next. She brought her nephew and a friend of his to help unload our moving truck. Never would I have guessed that Alice was 70 years old. She was tall, thin, and moved with grace, with great ease and purpose. She was born and raised on a farm outside of Du Bois and still lives there today. With a very quiet and kind disposition, Alice was always there to help. On my first Sunday morning in Du Bois, I met Leela, who was widowed. Her birthday was near and she would be 88 years old. She was a sweet Christian lady, but tough. In the brief period I've known her, she has fallen 3 times, and not once has she been seriously injured. One incident Leela enjoys alluding to is when she slipped on ice and fell under Alice's truck in the parking lot of the post office. She jokingly claimed that Alice tried to run her over. Even before meeting them, I developed a great respect for these ladies. Through correspondence with them, I learned that under tough circumstances, they kept the church alive in Du Bois. They kept the doors open and air out. And finally, after waiting for so long, they had a preacher. By their own declaration, it was God's answering their patient, faithful prayers that made the difference. The congregation was small, to say the least. There was no room for doubts or timidity. An important task was before me, and I was determined to overcome my fears and improve my life. It was a brand new start. The slate was clean, and I was going to take advantage of it. After all, the Lord allowed me to realize a long-time dream. I had made it to the Northwest. God was with me, but Satan, too, was in the mountains. Despite my determination, it didn't take long to remember why I wanted to escape to the mountains. The urge to avoid people was just as strong as ever, and I had to fight hard to overcome it. Serving as a preacher while attempting to be a hermit was difficult. They are diametrically opposed. Like serving 2 masters, you won't be successful with either one. Losing weight was the only remedy, and that took time. Not only did it take time, but something else. What was that something? Apparently, I didn't have it because I had remained fat for so many years. Maybe I had it, but just didn't yet know what it was. Regardless, I began to fall back into old eating habits. The roller coaster ride began again. No matter how good I was today, what would tomorrow be like? Tomorrow was another day. It was a day once again to stock the fridge for a week of victual hedonism or to contemplate another diet. I had considered starting a diet on Monday, but then realized next Friday would be the first of the month. It is well known that the first day of a month is the best time to start a diet. Mondays are always good diet commencement days, and a combination Monday, first day of the month promises guaranteed success. Unfortunately, those are few and far between. No, it would be senseless to start a diet on Monday since Friday is the first. Having that settled, the next important decision was what to get at the grocery store. The list would include a proper balance of the major food groups. I don't know what the groups are officially, but I do know they include fruit, vegetable, bread, dairy, and meat products. I could knock out both the fruit and dairy groups with one acquisition: a gallon of strawberry ice cream. Potato chips with French onion flavoring adequately took care of the vegetable group. And finally, packages of hot dogs and buns represent the meat and bread groups. Don't forget mustard and Dr. Pepper, and the list is complete. The real challenge is to purchase the perfect amount of food that would take me to exactly 11:59 p.m. on Thursday night. If I bought too much and had non-diet food left over on Friday the 1st, then I would have to wait until Monday the 3rd to start my diet. You see, it is unacceptable to waste food even of the non-diet nature. There are children starving in India, you know. No matter what kind of food it is, a trip to the grocery store is torture for a fat person. In an effort to lessen the pain, there are some helpful shopping guidelines one should heed. Number 1, shop at a time when the least number of people will be in the store. The invention of 24-hour shopping is one of exceptional genius. At 4 a.m., there is no shortage of carts, the store employees are not stressed, and there are no lines at the checkout. I enjoyed such luxuries due to progressive demands when I lived in the big city of Fort Worth, Texas. When I moved to Wyoming, I had to get used to the limited working hours of a small town. Our little solitary grocery store didn't open until 7 a.m. Shortly after opening each morning, they raised the United States flag in front of the store. That is when I did my shopping. Number 2, avoid children who are of the age of developed speech. Developed includes one-syllable words such as fat. This must be done at all costs. Children may seem innocent and sweet on appearance, but they are capable of spewing forth the foulest of offenses that language has to offer. Look at the fat man, Mommy. Almost as embarrassing as the comments of children is the reaction of their parents. Some parents laugh and point right along with their children. Others take the opportunity to explain to their children how rude it is to draw attention to the fatness of the man and force the children to apologize. Sometimes children will ask, "How did you get so fat?" My answer, if parents are out of earshot, by eating little children. Number 3, while removing the food from the basket for checkout, don't group all the fattening foods together. Proper spacing is important. For instance, push the ice cream through first. Then choose several healthy items to follow, such as chicken, vegetables, and fruit. After that comes the cookie mixes. Finally, diet soda, 2% milk, and toiletry items come before the frozen pies and pastry. The philosophy is the checker will be left with the impression you are purchasing fewer fattening foods. Be aware that this could backfire. If all the naughty foods are of the kind to be kept refrigerated or frozen, the sacker will put them all in the same bag, defeating the mission of divide and dupe. The final step is to get out of the store as fast as possible and go home. When I lived in the apartment complex, there would inevitably be a group of people lingering between the parking lot and my door. Not wanting them to see the fat man hauling his grazing fodder for the week, I incorporated the Trojan horse method. I would transport all my groceries from my truck to my apartment in an ice chest or a duffel bag. Once inside and out of sight, I felt happy and content that I was prepared for another week of dining debauchery. I weighed more than my scale could register, but I rigged it so I could know whether I gained or lost. Before long, I gained 25 pounds. For a few weeks, sleep became the new powerful craving in my life. Drowsiness didn't affect my appetite for food, but it did affect my appetite for KP duty or any other household chores. The place was a mess, but I didn't care. One might say the messy condition of the house symbolized the current state of my disorderly, tormented, and depressed subconscious. I would say I was being lazy and irresponsible. Nobody noticed my hibernation because I kept my office in my home. It wasn't unusual for me to spend several hours a day inside studying for Bible classes and sermons. But I was turning into the common stereotype people think about preachers, sloths who work only one day a week. I was worse than the stereotype. A particular passage of Scripture kept running through my mind. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which, having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. Proverbs 6:6-11. Searching through the book of Proverbs, I marked every passage I could find concerning laziness and read them often. Eventually, I straightened up the house and myself. Though the same old struggles remained, I was able to deal with them as I always had, one day at a time. As my 6-month anniversary in Du Bois approached, I was assisted in dealing with my problems by a couple of incidents that preoccupied my mind for a long time. Chapter 1 ended.